Mental health is something that sometimes we take for granted, and quite often we don't talk about it enough in the church. So, let's talk about it. Ahoy everyone, and welcome to another video where today it's a little bit different. We're going to be talking about mental health. This is something that is near and dear to my heart and is also near and dear to many people's hearts, but I fear that we don't talk about it enough within the church. Now, often we see, especially within scripture, of cases of things like demon possession and people essentially going a bit cuckoo, but mental health is so much more nuanced than that. It's so much more in depth than that. And one thing we have to realize when we're approaching the Bible, when we're approaching things that we see within it, and we read about all these stories and we read about things like demon possession. Yes, demon possession is real. It's a real thing, but also mental health is a real thing as well. And so I want to talk about sort of some of my experiences, and hopefully it may resonate with you a little bit. But also, one of the things I really want to do is to give you some help as well, to give you some steps that you can take to look after your mental health. Now, one of the things that is very, very apparent with especially people who are new converts to the Orthodox faith, or even Catholicism or Christianity in general, or even people who are going through that sort of deep research stage, is burnout. Burnout is so real. And if you don't look after yourself, if you don't give yourself time to relax and unwind, and you are constantly doing intensive searching and analysis and things of that nature, you will eventually burn yourself out. Now, what is burnout? So burnout is essentially when your brain shuts down after it is so exhausted to the point where it can't really function anymore. Burnout can become a absolute crippling affliction for you to be dealing with, because once you hit that stage, once you hit that wall and you go past it, your brain will take a long time to recover. When we're dealing with burnout, we need to make sure that we are giving ourselves the ample time to unwind, to relax, to take a step back. Now, obviously, our lives should be constantly seeking after Christ, to be constantly seeking after a closer relationship with Him, of unveiling His truths that He has revealed to us within the New Testament, within the Bible as a whole, also as well, reading the church fathers and saints, lives of the saints, etc. But there are people who don't look after their mental health, and they suffer with it. They will eventually hit that burnout, and once you hit that wall, your brain will essentially shut down, and it will take such a long time to recover. Typically, it's around about a month, maybe 2 months. It has gone longer in some cases, and once you hit that, there's nothing you can do about it. You have to let it run its course. You have to let your brain essentially reboot. It's kind of like when your computer freezes, right? You're doing a lot of like high intensity work on it. Might be doing like a bit of graphic design or an editing of video, or even, you've got multiple different tabs up on your web browser, and your computer's getting slower and slower and slower, and eventually it just freezes, and then you have to shut it down and you have to wait for it to restart. It's like that. Your computer only has a certain amount of RAM, which stands for random access memory. Once you've used all that RAM, sometimes it can dip into your hard drive storage, your solid state storage, the storage that's on your computer, your gigabytes that you have available to store files in order to use more RAM, but that's typically not what it's supposed to be used for. That's only to be used in emergencies, and eventually your CPU, your GPU will become overwhelmed and the computer will stick, will freeze, will slow down, become sluggish, and eventually it will just stop working. Nothing's going to fix it. You have to press and hold the power button and restart it. It can happen to your phone as well, or a tablet. And that reboot process that you go through when you're rebooting your computer is what your brain goes through when you're trying to recover from burnout. You have to let it run its course. And so burnout is so key, and it's so often overlooked whenever we are looking into something. You have to make sure you are giving yourself time to relax. Now, I'm guilty of this. I have burnt out before, and let me tell you, it is not fun. You are constantly tired. You're constantly just wanting to sleep all the time. You don't really want to do anything. You can't concentrate on anything. It is abysmal. But one thing that I want to help you understand is that it is normal to take a break. It is normal to take a step back from whatever it is you're doing. Now, another thing that can happen to many people is things like anxiety and depression. Anxiety is a very crippling affliction which many people suffer with. And it's important to understand how that affects you, how it manifests itself within your life, how depression affects you and manifests itself in your life. And you need to essentially work with it. You need to work around it. You need to help yourself. If you're constantly trying to push through anxiety, if you're trying to push through that sort of fear of crowds or a fear of the unknown, it might be an OCD thing where you have to, switch a light on like 3 times or things like that, obsessive compulsive tendencies. You can get so bogged down in that. And if you're trying to push past it, sometimes it can make it worse. And sometimes anxiety can be left to fester and to sort of grow, and eventually it becomes all consuming. It will develop into even greater anxieties. Now, you can learn certain grounding techniques, and you can learn a lot of sort of self-help. There is a lot of help available. And also with depression as well, often it's not something that like an overwhelming feeling of sadness. It could be just despair. It could be just like a complete lack of motivation, and oftentimes, depression does get worse, and it's important to address the core root issues that are causing these afflictions. Now, obviously, it is incredibly important that we do spend time with God, with reading scripture, with doing a bit of, devotional reading, or with, doing a bit of, Bible study or things like that. Spending time in prayer as well is important. But sometimes, especially if it's a fast, for instance, right? And you have to make sure you've got this mindset. You have to make sure that you're holding the fast at all times, and you can't stray. And if you stray from the fast, you've committed a massive sin, and fundamentally that's just not true. We place a lot of emphasis on the fast because it's good spiritual discipline. However, what's so important about understanding the fast is why we fast, why we do these things. It's the reason why, not making sure that we do stick to the fast. The reason of sticking to the fast is more out of obedience and self-limitation and control, as opposed to just following a set of rules because the church says so. We have to delve in and understand the sort of the nuanced meaning of the fast and why that is, why we have fasts in the first place. And also it's important to understand that there might be genuine medical reasons why you cannot fast. For instance, someone with anxiety fasting is not going to be a good option for you, because you are depriving your body of things that it needs in order to function. And so when you fast, it makes things worse. You know, and also it's worth bearing in mind as well that I'm not a priest. Okay, I am definitely not a priest. You need to talk to your priest about these things. But also as well, we need to exercise common sense and sensibility with a lot of these issues. And especially taking into account modern medical advances in diagnoses, understanding, and also treatment of these issues, so that we can live better lives as Orthodox Christians. Just because you fast doesn't make you a better Orthodox Christian than someone who doesn't fast. We need to understand our place within the church, within everything as a whole. We need to understand why we do these things, why we, sit down in a solemn moment of contemplation, reflection, and humility in prayer. We need to understand why we fast in the first place, why we attend liturgy, why we do all these things is important, and that formulates our response to certain issues as and when they come up. Also as well is, issues such as ADHD, which is something that I suffer with massively. I have a very bad case of ADHD. It is extreme. It is very debilitating. And oftentimes, you hear the phrase of, you just need to apply yourself. You just need to do this or do that. And oftentimes that can make things 10 times worse, because when someone with ADHD gets something wrong, okay, outwardly they may say, "Oh, I made a mistake, sorry. Oh, I forgot, I'm sorry." People with ADHD often have issues properly conveying their emotions, properly expressing themselves emotionally. And internally, there is such a massive struggle. Internally, there is a battle. And oftentimes when people forget, or they do something wrong, or they get into trouble, or what have you, internally they are saying to themselves, why am I like this? I've done it again. What's wrong with me? Why can't I just get it right? And it's important you understand these conditions, understand how they affect you on a day-to-day basis, so that you can live around it. Now, again, there are people out there who say, well, Christ is the only medicine you need. I would argue that can be incredibly dangerous for someone. We have, the liturgy has its place within our life. Our priests have their place within our life. Our, fasting has its place. Prayer has its place. But further than that, there are inventions of modern medical science, of treatments, of diagnoses and help that we can utilize to make ourselves better, to help heal ourselves. Now, certain conditions are lifelong, like, for instance, ADHD, especially if you're diagnosed as an adult and it wasn't treated as a child. You will be living with it for the rest of your life, and that's something I've had to come to terms with. I'm going to be suffering with ADHD for the rest of my life. But through various different techniques, through medication, I manage it. I manage a lot of the symptoms. It doesn't completely go away. It's not a permanent fix. But it's something that helps me get by day to day. It is a crutch that I lean on. Also, as well, is sometimes we experience the issue of wanting to become monastics. What do I mean by that is wanting to follow in the steps of monasticism, of the monks, of people who experience extreme spiritual discipline within our own lives. That can be really damaging to yourself. Monasticism is incredibly hard. It is a lifelong dedication to people who are chosen by God to follow that. It's not for everyone. And there are many issues that come about when people try and put monasticism and the practices of the monkhood, of being a monk, of being a monastic, and injecting that within everyday parishioners. And that could be really scary, really detrimental, really just, it doesn't necessarily gel well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with sharing a bit of wisdom, sharing a bit of knowledge and things like that, a bit of an insight that you someone may have learned if they were a monastic or something like that. But I think the danger is to try and force yourself to become a monk as a parishioner. It doesn't work that way. One of the things I would encourage you to do, if you are dealing with something that is mental health related, is, speak to your priest. See if you can get some, spiritual help, either via prayer or, what have you. But also go and see a doctor. Go and see your GP. Go and see, whoever you need to see, a psychologist, psychiatrist, someone who can do counselling. That can be a really great help to a lot of people. Doctors have a lot of knowledge and they have a lot of tools at their disposal that can help you. And it may not be right for you, but there's nothing wrong with getting that help. Admitting to yourself that you have a problem is half of the battle. A lot of times we live in denial. We live in that state of just solemn, like, no, I have to push through it. God will heal me. He will heal me eventually if I just pray another Jesus prayer, if I just fast one more time, if I just do this, if I just do that. Sometimes God does heal. It is entirely within his jurisdiction whether he heals or not. And, we have to understand that sometimes it is not in his best interest to allow us to be healed. Sometimes he's teaching us a lesson. Sometimes he's teaching us something. One of the things that I have learned over the last year especially is living with my ADHD and living with that condition. God is teaching me discipline. God is teaching me how to look for signs within my condition and how to, get around those, how to fix them. I've got oodles of alarms on my phone to remind me to do things, set off at different times on different days, and it'll just ring. And that's one tool that I use to keep myself on a sort of straight and narrow, on a regulated path. I have my medication. I have my, sort of like those moments of like, I just need to take a moment to step away and, just breathe for about 20 minutes, and then I can come back into a conversation if I'm getting a bit heated, etc. So my advice is to, look realistically at these things, to look at your path, to look at your understanding, and to still seek after God, still continue on that path towards Christ, but also, lean on those helps that are around you, lean on the spiritual help from your priest, lean on, the medications and the counseling and things from the medical side. And together it can work in unison. It can work in a great harmony. Remember, God has made this world. God has made our minds. God has allowed us to develop medicine to help, to help the sick. Some might even argue that, being a doctor is acting out healing in God's creatures, of acting out one of the promises in the Word. We see Christ giving these blessings to the disciples and to allow them to go forth and spread the gospel and healing the sick and the blind and the lame. Medicine can be an arm of that. And oftentimes we just forget that. So I encourage you, if you are struggling with something, if you're struggling with an issue, if you're struggling with a condition you think you have, okay, don't let me diagnose you. Don't let anyone on the internet diagnose you. Go and see a doctor. Go and get some help. See if you do meet the criteria. Go for an investigation. Typically with ADHD, right? I use ADHD as an example because I've lived through it. You will go to a doctor and you'll say, I think I have ADHD because I have this symptom, this symptom, this symptom, this symptom, this symptom. I've done an online probability test and it scored me as very most likely having having ADHD. I would like to be referred for a formal diagnosis. And that's the key that you have to jump through. I had to wait a good 2 years, maybe 3 years for my diagnosis. And that can be hard because you don't have any other help outside of that. But then once you have that diagnosis, it is such a weight that's lifted off your shoulders because you're just like, hey, I'm not broken. I didn't do anything to myself. I was born with this. There is help available. I can do this. And it just allows you to breathe. And God will give you strength to endure in the meantime. It's important to lean on God, but it's also important to lean on those helps that are around you that can help, that can allow you to deal with these things, to allow you to breathe. I think that's basically all that I really wanted to say. And just to encourage you as well, that, you know, if you are suffering with these things, seek help. Seek out God, seek out spiritual help, seek out a doctor, seek out all of these things and make sure you're getting the right help for yourself. And it's so important. It's so important that you look after yourself, because, you know, you can do irreparable damage to your brain if you let these things fester, if you let these things grow and manifest, and you let it consume you. It can be really, really hard to get rid of it. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like it, make sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. It's free, it helps me out. And if you haven't subscribed, or if you are subscribed and you haven't hit that notification bell, what's going on? Why haven't you hit it? It's free and it lets you know whenever I post a new video or if I do a live stream. And with that, let me say thank you so much for watching. God bless, and I will see you in the next video. Adios.